Before we start, I want you to imagine something with me. You've spent your whole life showing up for your family. Holidays, birthdays, the late-night calls when they need you. Then one day, right before Christmas, your daughter-in-law looks you in the eyes and says, "We're doing Christmas at my mom's this year. You can stay home and relax." No fight, no screaming, just being quietly cut out of the picture. Most people would sit in that empty house and swallow the hurt. But Linda didn't. She packed a suitcase, boarded a plane alone, and took a Christmas trip that made her entire family ask, "Mom, who is that man sitting next to you?" This is the story of a 67-year-old widow who finally stopped waiting for an invitation and chose herself instead. Tell me where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you love true stories. And let's step into Linda's Christmas.
My daughter-in-law didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam a door. She didn't say anything that would sound cruel if you wrote it down. But I still felt it like a slap. "We're doing Christmas at my mom's this year," she said, standing in my kitchen, hands neatly folded around a mug of coffee I had made for her. Then she smiled, that polite little smile she reserves for strangers, and added, "You can stay home and relax." Relax? That's what people tell you to do with things they don't want anymore. I'm Linda Dawson, and if you had walked into my house 10 minutes before that sentence, you would have thought we were the coziest family on earth. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla hung in the air. I'd just taken a tray of pecan pie bars out of the oven. The Christmas tree in the corner was already lit, even though it was still a week before Christmas, its lights reflecting off the old glass baubles Paul and I had collected the year we bought this house. 40 years. I've lived in this little Colorado house for 40 years, raised my son here, buried my husband from here. This living room has seen everything. Newborn cries, teenage slam doors, anniversary toasts, and the quiet beeping of hospital equipment the last time Paul came home. The walls remember, even if my family doesn't. I stood there with a dish towel in my hands, watching Hannah lean against my counter like she couldn't wait to be anywhere else. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "Oh," I said, my voice coming out softer than I intended. "Christmas? At your mom's?" She nodded, her ponytail bouncing a little. "Yeah, it just makes sense, you know. Mom's already hosting for my sister and her kids, and Mark doesn't want to drive all over town with the little ones. It'll just be easier if we're all in one place." Easier. There was that word again. Easier for who? "I see," I managed. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. "Well, that sounds nice." I added nice because that's what women my age are trained to be, nice, understanding, non-demanding. She took a sip of coffee, checked her phone, and said, "Thank you for understanding, Linda, like I just signed a permission slip." Then she grabbed her purse and called out, "Kids, say bye to Grandma, we have to go." Two little bodies barreled into the kitchen. My grandkids, Ethan and Lily, still in their school clothes, Lily's hair slightly crooked from a rushed braid. "Bye, Grandma," they shouted, wrapping their arms around my waist. Ethan's hands were sticky. I didn't mind. I bent down and hugged them tight, breathing them in like I could store the moment somewhere for later, for when the house would be quiet again. "Will you be there for Christmas, Grandma?" Lily asked, looking up at me with the same blue eyes her father used to have when he was 6 and missing his front teeth. I froze for half a second, then heard Hannah answer from the hallway, a little too quickly. "Grandma's going to have a relaxing Christmas at home this year, sweetheart. We'll call her, okay?" Lily frowned, confused. Ethan had already moved on, complaining about having to wear a nice shirt to Grandma Carol's. I forced a smile. "We'll talk, honey. Don't worry." They ran to the car. Hannah waved from the doorway, keys in hand, coat half on, already mentally gone. "Thanks for the coffee. We'll see you after the holidays, maybe?" "Of course," I said, because that is what I do. Of course. And then the door closed. The silence dropped into the house like a stone. I stood there for a long time, dish towel still in my hand, looking at the space where my grandchildren had been just moments before. The tree lights blinked in the corner, oblivious. The timer on the oven beeped, reminding me that the second pecan pie was done. I turned it off, pulled the pie out, set it down on the counter, and realized I had no idea who I was baking for anymore. I wish I could tell you I got angry, that I called Mark and demanded to know how the woman I welcomed into our family had just edited me out of Christmas. But I didn't. I did what women like me have done for decades. I cleaned the kitchen. I scrubbed a perfectly clean counter. I rearranged cookies on a plate that no one would eat. I straightened placemats for a dinner that was no longer going to happen. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the holiday centerpiece. Pine cones, fake berries, a little ceramic reindeer I'd had since Mark was a toddler. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, I could hear a car starting, children laughing somewhere down the street. Inside, it was just me and the sound of my own breathing. My phone buzzed, a group text from the women at church, photos of their grandkids visiting Santa, cookie recipes, someone complaining that her son's family wanted to do something modern this year instead of the traditional dinner. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard, about to type, "My family isn't coming at all." But then I imagined the responses, the pity, the "oh honey," the "you can always come to our house," followed by the awkward reality that they were just being polite. So I put the phone face down on the table and looked around my decorated silent house. For years, I told myself that as long as I still had Christmas with my son, I still had a place, a role, a reason to bake too much and fuss over centerpieces. Now, all at once, I felt like a guest in a life I had built. That night, I pulled out the big plastic tub of photo albums from under the stairs. I spread them out on the living room rug in front of the fireplace, like I was building an argument only I would ever see. There was Mark at 4 years old, face smeared with frosting, hands buried in wrapping paper. Mark at 10, wearing the sweater his grandmother knitted, pretending to hate it while secretly loving the attention. And there was Paul, carving the turkey, lighting the candles, grinning at me from behind a Santa hat he wore just to make Mark laugh. Picture after picture, year after year, each Christmas layered over the last like rings inside a tree. I traced Paul's smile with my fingertip. "You'd hate this," I whispered to him. "You'd have called Mark the second you heard and told him to bring his butt and his family home." My throat tightened. My eyes burned. Instead of crying, I closed the album and forced myself to say it. "It's just one Christmas. I'm fine." But for the first time in my life, even I didn't believe me. The next day, Mark called. He didn't start with, "How are you, Mom?" He started with, "So, Hannah talked to you about Christmas?" I could hear traffic in the background, a blinker ticking, one of the kids whining about a lost toy. "Yes," I said. "I heard." Guilt leaked into his voice immediately. "Mom, I hope you're not upset. You know how her mom likes to host. And with the kids, it's just easier." Easier again. I thought about saying, "Easier than what, Mark? Easier than driving 10 extra minutes to pick me up? Easier than setting one more plate at the table?" Instead, I swallowed the words, like I have swallowed so many things in my life, and said, "Of course, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." He exhaled in relief. There it was, the sound of a weight lifting off his shoulders because I'd agreed to carry it for him. "You're the best, Mom. We'll stop by after the holidays, okay? Promise." "Okay," I said, because I always do. When the call ended, I kept the phone pressed to my ear for a few extra seconds, listening to nothing. Then I lowered it, looked out the window, and watched as snow began to fall again, soft, gentle, indifferent. Down the street, I saw my neighbor's driveway crowded with cars, people getting out with casserole dishes, arms full of gifts, laughing as they stomped the snow off their boots. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone was someone's automatic invitation. Except me. For a moment, I didn't feel like I was living my life. I felt like I was watching it from across the street. That evening, I turned on the TV just for noise. Every channel was the same, families reuniting at airports, parents surprised by kids who'd flown home at the last minute, grandchildren squealing as they ran into their grandparents' arms. A montage of the exact thing I had quietly hoped for this year. I could have changed the channel. I didn't. It felt like I was forcing myself to look directly at the wound. "You're not part of anyone's Christmas story this year?" I murmured to myself. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. Later that night, I went upstairs with a box of ornaments I'd decided not to use. There was no point in putting up the second set of lights outside if no one was coming up the driveway to see them. I opened the hall closet to shove the box inside, and that's when I saw it, on the top shelf, half covered by an old blanket. Our suitcase. The one Paul and I used for our first and only trip to Europe, Paris, Rome, Vienna, names that used to feel impossibly far until we were suddenly standing in the middle of them, holding hands like two kids let loose in a storybook. I dragged the suitcase down, brushed the dust off the handle, and for a moment, I wasn't in a dim hallway in Colorado. I was in a tiny hotel room in Rome, laughing as Paul tried to order coffee in terrible Italian. "See, Linda?" he'd said back then, eyes bright, hand warm in mine. "The world isn't as big as we think it is. You just have to be brave enough to step into it." Standing there in the hallway, holding that same suitcase, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Not anger, not self-pity. Something closer to defiance. If my family could so easily decide that my place this Christmas was alone in a decorated, quiet house, then maybe, just maybe, I could decide something different for myself. I set the suitcase upright in the hallway, left the box of unused ornaments on the floor, and went to bed with one simple, terrifying, exhilarating thought buzzing in my mind. What if this year I didn't wait to be invited anywhere at all? I didn't sleep much after I pulled that suitcase down. I lay in bed, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight leaking through the curtains, listening to the old house creak and sigh around me. This house has spent years holding its breath for holidays. waiting for doors to open, for voices to spill in, for shoes to pile up by the front mat. This year, it was just me. At some point, I turned on my side and saw the shape of the suitcase in the hallway, silhouetted in a sliver of light from under the door. It looked ridiculous and hopeful at the same time, like a promise I wasn't sure I was brave enough to keep. I don't know when I finally fell asleep, but when I woke up, the decision was still there, sitting in my chest like a stone and a spark at the same time. I made coffee the way I always do. 2 scoops, water to the line, a little cinnamon in the filter because Paul liked it that way. The ritual calmed my hands just enough to open the laptop. The screen lit up with the same homepage I'd had for years. Local news, weather, a recipe for peppermint bark I wasn't going to make this year. In the search bar, my fingers hesitated, then typed, Christmas trips for seniors. Rows of bright photos appeared. Older couples holding hands under twinkling lights. Solo travelers standing in front of snow-covered cathedrals. Groups of gray-haired friends wrapped in scarves, smiling like teenagers. I scrolled slowly, heart thudding in my chest. Bus tours through small American towns, river cruises, weekend spa packages. All of them looked nice, safe, predictable. Then I saw it. A banner ad with golden lights and snowflakes around the edges. Christmas in Europe, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Designed for solo and senior travelers. Limited spots. Departure December 22nd. I checked the tiny date on the corner of my screen. December 19th. 3 days. 3 days between you can stay home and relax in a plane across the ocean. My first thought was, that's insane, Linda. My second thought was, you are 67, your husband is gone, your son is busy, and your daughter-in-law just uninvited you from Christmas. Insane compared to what? I clicked on the link. The page loaded with an itinerary, Munich, Salzburg, Vienna, Lucerne, Christmas markets, guided tours, group dinners, time on your own. There was a section that read, perfect for solo seniors, you won't be alone unless you want to be. Something in me shifted when I read that. I had spent years being with people and still feeling alone. What would it be like to be alone and not feel lonely for once? I scrolled to the price and winced. It wasn't cheap. I am not a rich woman. I live off Paul's pension, a bit of social security, and the small savings we built being careful and saying no to a lot of things for ourselves. But we had always said we'd do one last big trip together when we both turned 70. He never made it there. The money was still sitting in the same account, untouched, labeled in his handwriting, travel. For a second, I felt guilty, like spending it alone would be a betrayal. Then I heard his voice in my head again, the way he used to say my name when I was overthinking everything. Linda, for once in your life, be a little bit selfish. The pointer hovered over the Book Now button. My hand was actually shaking. I clicked. A form appeared. Name, date of birth, emergency contact, passport number I had to dig through a drawer to find because I hadn't used it in years. There was a question. Are you traveling alone? I checked yes. The next question. Do you require assistance at the airport? I hesitated, then left it blank. If I was going to do this, I wanted to know that I could still do it. I entered my card details. Every number felt like a step further away from the version of me who sat quietly in doorways and said, "It's okay. I understand." When I hit submit, the screen froze for a moment. My heart stopped with it. Then, finally, congratulations, your Christmas tour is confirmed. I sat back in my chair, hands still hovering above the keyboard, and laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was shaky, half disbelieving, the kind of laugh you let out when you've just jumped into cold water and realized you're still breathing. For a few minutes, I did nothing. I just sat there at the old kitchen table, the same table where I'd attended parent-teacher conferences by phone, balanced checkbooks, and iced birthday cakes. The same table where Hannah had told me, you can stay home and relax. But now, sitting there with a confirmed booking in my inbox, I realized something quietly terrifying. I had no idea how to tell anyone. Mark would worry. Then he'd feel guilty. Then he'd try to talk me out of it, not because he didn't love me, but because my independence would confront him with his neglect. Hannah would be polite, overly enthusiastic. I'm so happy for you, Linda. While secretly relieved that I wouldn't be a lonely grandma story she had to deal with. I stared at my phone, sitting face down beside the laptop. I reached for it, pulled my hand back. Then I realized, for once, I didn't owe anyone an explanation for how I chose to survive a hurt they had no problem causing. I closed the laptop and decided not to tell them. The next 2 days moved the way time moves right before a big storm, slow and fast at the same time. I pulled the suitcase fully into my bedroom and opened it on the bed. Inside, there was still an old luggage tag with both our names on it, Paul and Linda Dawson. I ran my thumb over his name, then carefully took the tag off and placed it in my nightstand drawer like a small ceremony. Just me this time, I whispered. I folded sweaters, packed 2 pairs of comfortable shoes, my warmest coat, gloves, the red scarf Mark bought me when he was 12 with his own allowance money because he thought I looked cold. I put in Paul's old travel journal, the one with messy handwriting and coffee stains from that trip decades ago. The last thing I packed was the gold locket he'd given me on our 20th anniversary. I slipped it over my head, let it rest against my chest, and told myself it was okay to carry both my grief and my courage in the same body. That afternoon, my neighbor Janice knocked on the door. She's my age, with a louder laugh and a busier house. "Hey, Linda," she said, holding a container of fudge. "Brought you some sugar. I was making a batch for the grandkids and thought, well, Linda needs some too." I took it, smiling. "Thank you. It looks delicious." She leaned in a little, lowering her voice like we were about to share a secret. "You know you're always welcome at our place on Christmas, right? If you're, alone." There it was, the word everyone tried not to say out loud but built entire sentences around. Alone. I almost told her, right there in the doorway, with the fudge between us and snow starting to collect on her shoulders. I almost said, "I won't be home. I'm going to Europe." But some small protective part of me wanted to hold this one thing close, just a little longer before the world had opinions about it. So instead, I said, "You're very kind, Janice. Thank you. I'll be okay." She patted my arm, eyes soft with the kind of pity I used to think I deserved. "Well, if you change your mind, you know where we are." After she left, I set the fudge on the counter, looked at the suitcase on my bed, and felt something shift again. The old version of me would have said yes to that invite just so no one had to feel uncomfortable about my empty house. This version of me was quietly packing for a continent they didn't even know I was heading to. The night before my flight, I unplugged the Christmas tree. Standing there in the darkened living room, I almost plugged it back in. It felt wrong to leave it off, like I was abandoning something. But then I realized the tree would be here when I came back. The house would be here. The memories would still hum in the walls. The only thing that might not be the same was me. I walked from room to room, checking windows, making mental notes of where everything was. I left one small string of lights on the mantle set to a timer, just enough that if anyone walked by at night, they'd see a glow and think, that house still has a little magic in it. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. It was still dark outside, the kind of blue-black that makes you feel like the world hasn't fully decided to wake up yet. I showered, dressed in comfortable travel clothes, and checked my boarding pass for the 100th time. Passport, wallet, phone charger, travel-sized tissues for when my emotions inevitably caught up with me. I wheeled the suitcase to the front door, took one last look at the living room, and whispered, "I'll be back." To the house. To myself. I wasn't entirely sure which one I meant. The airport was buzzing. Families huddled around piles of luggage, teenagers in Christmas pajamas, men in business suits checking their watches, faces lit up by flight information screens. I felt very small. I joined the line at the check-in counter, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it was the only solid thing in the world. When it was my turn, the young woman behind the desk smiled mechanically. "Good morning. Where are you flying today?" "Munich," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. She typed on her keyboard, then glanced up. "Traveling alone?" The question was innocent, routine. Still, I felt it. "Yes," I answered. "Just me." She nodded, tagged my suitcase, and slid my passport back to me. "Have a wonderful trip." I stepped aside, watching my suitcase disappear on the conveyor belt, feeling like a piece of my old life was rolling away with it. At security, I did all the usual things, took off my shoes, removed my jacket, fumbled with the plastic bins, got flustered when the line backed up behind me. But somewhere between the metal detector and putting my shoes back on, I caught sight of myself in a reflective panel. Gray hair, soft lines around my mouth, that familiar, automatic, apologetic expression women my age wear in public spaces. I straightened my shoulders. For once, I was not in anyone's way. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At the gate, I found a seat by the window and watched planes crawl across the tarmac like giant, patient insects. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Hey Mom, just checking in. Kids are excited for Christmas at Hannah's parents'. Hope you're doing okay. Love you." I stared at the screen. The easy thing, the old thing, would be to answer, "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'll be home." I typed it, then deleted it. In its place, my fingers wrote, "I'm heading out of town for a bit. I'll tell you all about it when I'm back. Have a wonderful Christmas, Mark. Love you too." I hovered over the send button. Sent. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, him typing. Then they disappeared. Maybe he got distracted. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe both. Boarding was called. As I walked down the jet bridge, the familiar smell of airplane carpets and recycled air hit me, and with it came a flood of memories. Paul and I arguing playfully about who got the window seat, Mark pressed against the glass as a boy, eyes wide. I found my row. An aisle seat. Good. Easier on the knees. The window seat was still empty. I stowed my bag, sat down, and tried not to look like someone who had just upended her entire emotional life in 72 hours. A few minutes later, I heard a calm, low voice. "Excuse me, I believe this is my seat." I looked up. A tall man with silver hair, neatly trimmed beard, and kind brown eyes was smiling down at me, boarding pass in hand. He looked steady. The kind of person you instinctively trust not to shove their seat all the way back or hog the armrest. "Yes, of course," I said, standing to let him in. He slid into the window seat, set a worn leather satchel under the seat in front of him, and exhaled like he'd just finished a marathon none of us had seen. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then he turned his head toward me and said, with that same easy voice, "Heading home or heading away?" I blinked. That was a more honest question than he probably realized. "Heading somewhere new," I replied. His mouth curved into a small smile. "Good answer." He offered his hand. "I'm David. David Monroe." "Linda," I said, shaking his hand. The warmth of his grip surprised me. People don't shake hands much anymore. "Nice to meet you, Linda, who's heading somewhere new," he said. As the plane doors closed and the engines began their low, rumbling growl, I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't just watching my life happen, I was boarding it. The flight to Munich was long, but not in the way I expected. I thought I'd spend 10 hours staring at the seat back, counting the lines on the safety card, trying not to think about the life I'd left behind for a week. Instead, I found myself talking. Not small talk, not, "Where are you from? What do you do? How's the weather?" Real talk, the kind that sneaks up on you when two strangers are suspended in the air between one life and the next. "So," David said once we were settled, the plane shuddering gently through a patch of turbulence, "what made you decide to fly across the world 2 days before Christmas?" He said it casually, but his eyes were soft, like he knew there was a real answer hiding under the polite one. I could have said, "Oh, just wanted a change of scenery." I didn't. "My daughter-in-law told me not to come," I heard myself say. The words surprised even me. They sounded harsher, out loud, than they had in my head. David didn't flinch. He nodded slowly. "Ah," he said quietly. "The soft knife." I tilted my head. "The what?" "The soft knife," he repeated. "The things people say that sound nice on paper, but cut all the same. You know, you can stay home and relax. We don't want to burden you. We thought you'd be more comfortable not coming." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "That's exactly what she said," I replied. He glanced at me, eyes knowing. "I've heard it a few times," he said. "My son and his wife moved across the country a few years ago. They fly in for the big holidays when they can, but there's always a reason why it's easier if I stay where I am, so I started going places." "You travel every Christmas?" I asked. He nodded. "First year after my wife passed, I stayed in the house, did everything right, set the table for myself, watched the specials, pretended I couldn't hear the silence." He looked out the window for a second. We were somewhere over the ocean now, the world below us, invisible. "Second year," he continued, "I booked a ticket instead. It didn't fix everything, but at least the silence outside matched the inside, and there were other people like me." "Other people like us," I corrected. He smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. We talked for hours. About small things at first, favorite cities, how airplane coffee always tastes just a little bit like burnt hope, how we both still printed boarding passes because we didn't trust our phones not to die. Then we drifted into deeper water. I told him about Paul, about the way he used to tap my hand twice under the table if he thought I was about to say something too honest in front of guests, about the way he'd slow dance with me in the kitchen when Mark was a baby and wouldn't sleep, swaying between the fridge and the stove to some song only we could hear. I told him about losing him, not just the moment in the hospital when the machines went quiet, but the long, slow losing, the shrinking of our shared world from trips and plans and half-finished projects down to pill bottles and doctors' offices and chairs pulled up next to a bed. David listened. Really listened. Not with the fixed face people wear when they're just waiting for you to stop. When he talked about his wife, his voice shifted slightly, like there was a part of him that still lived in those stories with her. Ellen loved winter, he said. Most people tolerated it. She adored it. Said snow made everything honest. You could finally see who cleaned their sidewalks and who pretended they didn't know it was their job. I laughed. That sounds like something my husband would say. He tilted his head. I wondered, he said softly. I didn't understand what he meant then. Not yet. By the time we landed in Munich, my body was tired, but my mind felt strangely awake. The airport was all glass and clean lines, filled with travelers in heavy coats and thick scarves. Signs in German and English pointed in every direction. We picked up our bags, and I found a woman holding a small sign with the name of our tour company on it. "Welcome, welcome," she chirped. A cheerful woman in her 50s with a red hat and a voice that could cut through any crowd. "I'm Ingrid. If you're on the Christmas in Europe tour, please gather round." People trickled toward her, a couple from Florida in matching reindeer sweaters, 2 sisters from Canada, a quiet man who looked like he'd been dragged there by his own loneliness, and a small group of women who announced they were celebrating divorce number 2 by seeing Europe without men. I felt awkward for a moment, standing on the edge of this small temporary family. Then David stepped closer and said, "Well, looks like we're not the only ones who refuse to stay home." We checked into the hotel, all dark wood and modern lighting, and I stepped into a room that felt like it belonged to someone braver than I was. A single bed, a desk, a window looking out over the city, rooftops dusted with snow. I set my suitcase down, stood in the middle of the room, and let it hit me. I had really done it. I had flown across an ocean by myself. I opened the window a crack. Cold air rushed in, carrying the distant sound of a church bell and the faint smell of roasted chestnuts. "Okay, Linda," I whispered to myself. "You're here. Don't spend the whole time hiding in your room." That evening, Ingrid gathered us in the lobby for a short walking tour and a visit to the Christmas market. If you've never been to a European Christmas market, it's like stepping into the inside of a snow globe. Lights strung overhead like someone sprinkled the sky with warm stars. Stalls lined up in neat rows, selling everything from wooden toys to hand-painted ornaments to heart-shaped gingerbread cookies with words like Liebe and Für dich written in white icing. The air smelled like cinnamon, smoke, roasting meat, and something sweet and spiced I couldn't name at first. "Glühwein," Ingrid explained, holding up a steaming mug of deep red liquid. "Mulled wine warms your hands and your heart." She winked. I liked her immediately. David appeared at my elbow with 2 mugs. "I figured if I got one and you walked past empty-handed, I'd look selfish," he said. So I brought a backup. I laughed. Very noble of you. I took the mug. The heat seeped into my gloves. The first sip burned my tongue, but in a pleasant way. Sweet, spicy, like someone had liquefied the idea of Christmas. We walked slowly through the market, falling into easy conversation. He bought a carved, wooden ornament shaped like a small church. I picked up a tiny hand-painted angel with gold wings and a slightly crooked halo. For your tree at home? He asked. For my tree, I said, and for this Christmas. So I don't forget I was here. The words surprised me. Some part of me still believed this entire trip was fragile, that I might wake up in my bed in Colorado and realize it was a daydream. But the small wooden angel in my hand was solid, real. So was the ache in my feet and the warmth in my chest. At one point, we stopped near a stall selling candles. Fat white ones, tall, thin ones, red ones molded into the shapes of stars and bells. Do you ever feel, I asked quietly, like you're cheating on your grief by being happy without the person you lost? I hadn't planned to say it, but the question had been sitting there, heavy on my tongue. David took a long breath. All the time, he said. First time I laughed after Ellen died, really laughed. I felt sick afterward, like I'd betrayed her. He picked up a small candle, turned it over in his hands. But then I thought, if the positions were reversed, would I want her stuck in a house full of photos, apologizing to my memory every time something made her smile? He set the candle down, met my eyes. I'd haunt her if she did, he said lightly. I laughed, the sound coming out a little wetter than I meant it to. My eyes burned. I think Paul would too, I said. Then maybe, David replied. Being happy is the most loyal thing we can do. I held that sentence like a small warm stone in my pocket for the rest of the night. Over the next few days, our group moved like a small caravan of wandering souls through Germany and Austria. We took a bus through snow-dusted countryside, fields and forests, sliding past like scenes in a movie. We walked through old cathedrals with ceilings so high you felt God could actually hear you there. We listened to choirs sing carols in languages some of us didn't understand, but felt anyway. I shared tables with people whose names I'd only known for 48 hours, but whose stories made my own loneliness feel less sharp. A woman named Claire told me she'd been left out of her own daughter's wedding plans because her ex-husband's new wife fit the aesthetic better for the pictures. A man named George admitted he'd signed up because his house was starting to echo. We were all, in our own ways, refugees from somebody else's holiday. And somehow that made it easier to breathe. Through all of it, David was there, not in a suffocating way, just in the way some people have of finding the same pace as you. If I lingered to read a plaque in a museum, he somehow ended up beside me, making a quiet joke about how many statues looked like they regretted agreeing to pose. If I stopped to take a picture of a streetlight or a doorway, he didn't rush me. He just waited, hands in his pockets, like time was a thing we actually had. One evening in Vienna, our group had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking a narrow street where snow drifted down in lazy, glowing flakes. Inside, the walls were lined with old photographs, couples dancing, families gathered around tables, a man playing a violin in a corner. Candles flickered on each table. Someone at the bar was humming along to a soft jazz version of Silent Night. I felt present. not as someone's mother, someone's widow, someone's afterthought. Just as a woman sitting in a foreign city, warm and alive. When the waiter poured wine, David lifted his glass toward me. "To second chances," he said. I raised mine, and to not waiting for someone else to give them to us. Our glasses touched with a soft, clear sound. The next morning, I woke early in Vienna and decided to walk alone before breakfast. The city was still quiet, the streets only just beginning to stir. I found a bench near a frozen fountain topped with a thin layer of snow and sat down. My breath puffed out in front of me in small white clouds. The air smelled like coffee and bread from a nearby cafe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Mark. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to check on you. Kids keep asking what you're doing for Christmas. We'll try to FaceTime you from Hannah's parents' place. Love you." I read it twice. Old Linda would have replied immediately, "Just at home, tree is up, don't worry about me." The version of me sitting on that cold bench in Vienna looked up at the sky instead. Soft gray clouds, a bell chiming somewhere, a city waking up without any idea that a grandmother from Colorado was sitting there, trying to decide if she was allowed to have a life her family didn't know about yet. I lifted my phone, switched to the camera, turned it toward the square in front of me. The fountain, the narrow streets, the soft morning light touching the rooftops. I took a picture, and I typed, "Merry Christmas from Vienna. I'm having a wonderful time. Tell the kids Grandma loves them." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The typing dots appeared almost immediately, then stopped. I smiled and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Whatever storm that message stirred up back home could wait. Right then, the only thing I had to do was stand up and keep walking. Later that day, our group visited another Christmas market, this one in Salzburg, tucked between old buildings like a secret someone decided to share. Snow fell in slow, drifting flakes. Children ran past with gingerbread in their hands, faces sticky and happy. I wandered from stall to stall, touching hand-knit scarves, admiring tiny painted nativity scenes, and breathing in smells I wished I could bottle and take home. David found me near a stall selling hot chocolate. He held out a paper cup. "You looked like you needed this," he said. I took it, warming my fingers on the sides. "You have a talent," I replied, for showing up with exactly what I didn't know I wanted. He smiled. "I used to do that for my students. Now I just do it for whoever gets stuck sitting next to me on planes." We sat on a nearby bench, watching people move through the square. No one knew us. No one expected anything from us. We could have been anyone. "I posted a picture this morning," I said suddenly. "Of Vienna?" he asked. "Of us," I replied, feeling my cheeks warm even in the cold air. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo someone from our group had snapped yesterday. Him and me standing in front of a giant Christmas tree, both mid-laugh because the first attempt had cut off the top of his head. The caption read, "Sometimes the best company appears when you stop waiting for an invitation." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's a good caption," he said. My phone exploded, I admitted. Friends from church, old co-workers, neighbors I haven't seen in years, all of them commenting things like, "You look so happy, Linda, and good for you. You deserve this." "And your family?" he asked gently. I hesitated. Mark texted, "Mom, where are you? Who is that man?" Then another, "Please call me." I swallowed. And Hannah sent a message too. Wow, I didn't realize you were traveling. You look different. Is that someone special? David was quiet for a moment. How does that make you feel? He asked. I looked up at the sky, snow landing softly on my eyelashes. Honestly, I said, it makes me feel like they only realized I exist when someone else noticed me. He nodded slowly. That happens, he said. People get used to your love being background noise. Then one day, someone else tunes into it, and suddenly they're very interested in the volume. I laughed once, a short, sharp sound. My son is probably pacing the kitchen right now, trying to figure out if he should be worried or offended or both. And what do you want him to be? David asked. I thought about that. I want him, I said slowly, to realize I'm not just an extra chair at his table, that I had a life before him, and I'm allowed to have one after, even if he didn't plan it. David smiled, small and proud. I think you're well on your way. That evening, Ingrid organized a small gift exchange in the hotel lobby. We had all been told to buy something from one of the markets. Nothing big, just something that reminded us of the trip. We sat in a loose circle, paper bags and small wrapped packages on our laps. Someone had convinced the hotel staff to let us plug in a speaker, and soft carols played in the background. When it was my turn, David handed me a small box wrapped in simple brown paper tied with a thin red ribbon. "Merry Christmas, Linda," he said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a snow globe. Not the cheap kind with glitter that looked like broken plastic, but a delicate glass one with a tiny wooden house inside. 2 small figures sitting beside a Christmas tree through the little painted window. I turned it over. Snow swirled around the house, then settled gently. "It reminded me of you," he said quietly. "Someone who carries warmth wherever she goes." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes blurred. "David," I said, finally, voice soft. "It's beautiful." "Good," he replied. "Then it's found the right home." Later that night, after everyone drifted off to their rooms, David and I ended up in the small hotel lounge, just the two of us, a couple of half-empty teacups on the table between us. The only light came from a lamp in the corner and the soft glow of the city through the window. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was weighing whether or not to say something. "Can I tell you something?" he asked finally. "Of course," I said. "I knew your husband," he said. The words landed between us like a dropped glass. "You... what?" I said, sitting up straight. He took a breath. "My brother, Stephen, served with Paul in the Navy. They were close. I met Paul once, a long time ago, at Stephen's house. You were there. You probably don't remember me." I was just the younger brother dropping by. My mind rushed backward, trying to pull a thread from the tangled ball of memory. A barbecue, loud music, Paul laughing with another man over a story I only half heard, me in the kitchen, refilling bowls, wiping counters, being introduced to Stephen's brother David in passing. I hadn't thought of that day in years. I do remember Stephen, I said slowly, and I remember, yes, I remember you. Barely. You had more hair then. He laughed, relief flashing across his face. "Didn't we all?" he said. He grew serious again. "After that day," he continued, "Paul talked about you now and then. Not in a way that felt like bragging. Just, you'd come up in stories. He'd say, 'Linda would love this place,' or 'Linda would have the common sense not to let me do this.' My throat tightened. "He loved you very much," David said simply. I swallowed hard. "I know," I whispered. "I recognized your name," he went on, "when I saw the tour list a few weeks ago. But I didn't want to overwhelm you or make it weird, so I waited until I felt like you had both feet here, you know? Not still half in that empty living room." I let out a shaky laugh. "That living room feels less and less empty every day I'm here," I said. He reached across the table and placed his hand gently over mine. "I think," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that if Paul could see you right now, buying angels in Salzburg, drinking terrible airplane coffee, ignoring texts long enough to finish your hot chocolate, he'd be proud. He'd say, 'She finally did something just for herself.'" Tears spilled over then, quietly, not the messy, heaving kind I'd cried on the bathroom floor the week after he died. These were slower, warmer, like something inside me was thawing. David didn't look away. He didn't start talking faster to fill the silence. He just squeezed my hand and let me have the moment. In that small hotel lounge, miles away from the house where my daughter-in-law had told me to stay home and relax, I felt something settle into place. Grief, gratitude, a strange, gentle hope, all sitting together at the same table. Later in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through the photos on my phone. The markets, the cathedrals, the snow, the picture of David and me under the tree. I opened the social media app again. My notifications were still buzzing. Hearts, comments, messages. One comment from an old friend caught my eye. "Linda, I've never seen you glow like this. Wherever you are, stay there a little longer." I smiled. Then my phone pinged with a new message from Mark. "Mom, are you really in Europe? Who is that man? Why didn't you tell us you were going?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. For once, I didn't respond right away. I set the phone on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and lay back on the bed. The room was quiet, but I no longer felt like I was being devoured by the silence. Somewhere in the building, someone laughed. On the street below, a car drove past on wet pavement. Beside the bed, on the little table, my snow globe caught a sliver of light from the window. Two tiny figures sat beside a Christmas tree, forever together inside their glass world. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep feeling not like a woman left behind, but like someone finally catching up to herself. Christmas morning in Salzburg did not feel like any Christmas I had ever known. There was no rush of wrapping paper, no squeals from the living room, no turkey slow roasting in the oven back home. Instead, I woke up to the sound of church bells echoing through the cold air, ringing off stone walls older than my entire country. Light spilled through the curtains, soft and gold against the snow outside. I sat up slowly, feeling a quiet I didn't have to fight. For the first time in years, my heart didn't feel heavy on Christmas morning. It felt open. I wrapped my robe around me, walked over to the window, and watched people crossing the square below. Families, couples, a woman walking a small, determined dog in a red sweater. Somewhere, a choir was warming up, notes drifting through the air like birds. On the nightstand, my phone blinked with notifications. Dozens of them. I sat back on the bed, tucked my legs under me, and picked it up. Friends from Colorado, old coworkers, women from church, all saying the same thing in different words. Linda, you look beautiful. You seem so happy. Good for you, girl. I smiled, but it was the messages from Mark that caught my breath. Mom, are you really in Europe? Why didn't you tell us you were going? Who is that man? Another, sent a few hours later. We're at Hannah's parents' house. The kids saw your picture and won't stop talking about it. Please call me. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over his name. The old me would have apologized first, for worrying him, for not informing them, for daring to do something without their approval. The woman sitting in that Austrian hotel room set the phone down on the quilt for a moment instead and took a breath. I wasn't avoiding him. I was choosing not to come to this conversation from the place that had always kept me small. When I finally hit call, my hands were steady. He answered on the second ring. Mom? His voice was tight, caught between worry and frustration. Hi, sweetheart, I said. Happy Christmas? There was a pause. Are you in Europe? He asked. Yes, I replied. I'm in Austria right now. We were in Germany first. We're heading to Switzerland next. We? He asked quickly. I smiled to myself. Our tour group, I said, and my friend David. Silence hummed on the line. I could hear muffled voices in the background, plates clinking, a TV playing some holiday special. Why didn't you tell us? He asked at last. His voice wasn't angry, just bewildered, like he was trying to fit this new version of me into the box he'd kept me in his whole life. Because, I said gently, the last time we talked about Christmas, you told me your family would be at Hannah's parents' house, and your wife told me I could stay home and relax. He exhaled sharply. Mom, that's not what we... It's exactly what you said, I cut in, still calm. No one asked what I wanted. No one tried to make room for me. You assumed I would be fine spending Christmas alone in the house where I built this family. He went quiet. I could almost hear the words hitting him one by one. I didn't want to fight with you, Mark, I continued. I didn't want to beg for a chair at a table I've helped set my whole life. He sighed. I heard a door close in the background, like he'd stepped away from the noise. You're right, he said finally, his voice smaller. We were selfish. I was selfish. I thought it would just be easier. There's that word again, I said softly. He let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, he murmured. There's that word. I'm not calling to make you feel guilty, I said. Guilt won't change anything. I just want you to understand something. What? He asked. That I love you, I said. And I love my grandchildren. But I will not sit in a quiet house telling myself I'm lucky for crumbs of attention when I deserve a seat at the table. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me how steady it was. And if I'm not welcome at one table, I added, I'll find another, even if that table is in a different country. He was silent for a long time. I'm sorry, Mom, he said finally. I really am. We should never have left you out like that. I know, I replied, and I hope you don't do it again. Not to me, not to anyone. I heard a sniffle. My son, a grown man, trying not to cry on the phone with his mother. Are you happy? He asked suddenly. The question caught me by surprise. I looked around the room. The open suitcase with neatly folded clothes, the snow globe David had given me, the map of Europe on the desk, the thin line of frost at the edge of the window. Yes, I said. I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm living a life instead of waiting for one." He blew out a breath. "Then, I'm glad," he said. "Really, the kids miss you. They want to see you when you get back." "I want to see them too," I said. "Tell them Grandma is bringing stories." "And David?" he asked, a hint of teasing trying to sneak in. I smiled. "David is bringing his own stories," I replied. We both laughed, the tension easing just a little. "Call us when you land back home," he said. We want to hear everything." "I will," I promised. When I hung up, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel like I had to prove I was okay. I felt equal. Like we had finally spoken to each other as two adults, not a mother forever shrinking herself to fit her child's comfort. Switzerland was like a postcard someone had forgotten to put away. Mountains sharp against a clear blue sky, lakes still as glass, villages that looked like they had been built for a fairy tale. On our last day, David and I walked along the edge of a lake, our breaths white in the air. "So," he said, "would you call this a successful act of Christmas rebellion?" I laughed. "I would," I said. "And I'm not sure I'm going back to the version of me that didn't believe she was allowed to do something like this." "Good," he replied, "because I was going to ask if you'd like to do it again sometime." "Another Christmas?" I teased. "Maybe something less dramatic," he said. "A spring trip, somewhere with flowers instead of snow, though I admit, you wear snow well." I felt my cheeks warm. "I'd like that," I said honestly. We walked a little longer in comfortable silence. Two people with entire histories behind them, finding a small, shared chapter at the edge of a lake thousands of miles from where their lives had started. Coming home was like walking into a familiar song with different lyrics. The house was exactly as I'd left it. The tree stood in the corner, its lights off, ornaments catching the faint winter light. I set my suitcase down, took off my coat, and just stood there in the hallway. It didn't feel like a place I'd been sentenced to anymore. It felt like somewhere I had chosen to return to. I walked through each room slowly, placing pieces of the trip where they belonged. The tiny wooden angel on a branch near the top of the tree. The carved ornament David bought in Munich, hanging low enough for small hands to touch next year. The snow globe on the mantel, where the light could catch it in the evenings. I made myself tea, sat at the same kitchen table where I'd once been told to relax at home, and opened the stack of mail. Bills, a coupon booklet, 2 Christmas cards from neighbors, and 1 envelope with Mark's handwriting on it. I opened it carefully. A photo slipped out, the kids in matching pajamas standing in front of a tree that was not mine, both smiling wide. On the back, in Lily's uneven letters, was written, "We miss you, Grandma." Inside the card, the message was simple. "We missed you, Mom. We're sorry. Come over soon. We want to hear everything." My eyes stung, but the tears that gathered didn't feel like the ones I'd cried before. They weren't from emptiness. They were from the feeling of something repairing itself, not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly. They came that weekend. I baked my pecan pie, not out of obligation, but because I genuinely wanted my kitchen to smell like cinnamon again. When their car pulled into the driveway, my heart jumped the same way it used to when Mark came home from college. The kids ran up the front steps and slammed into me so hard I had to brace myself on the doorframe. Grandma, tell us about the castles. Did you see real reindeer? Who's David? Their questions tumbled over each other, a bright, chaotic flood. Behind them, Hannah hung back a little. Her eyes were shiny. Her smile was small and careful. "Hi, Linda," she said. "Thank you for having us over." I could have said, "I always had you over?" Instead, I simply smiled and said, "Come in, your family." Later, after dinner, when the kids were in the living room building a fort out of couch cushions, Hannah came to stand by the sink while I rinsed dishes. "Linda," she started, then stopped, gripping the edge of the counter. "I owe you an apology." I set the dishcloth down and turned to face her. She took a breath. "I shouldn't have told you to stay home," she said. I thought I was simplifying things. Less driving, less juggling, less everything. But really, I was just deciding for you, and that wasn't my place. Her voice wobbled. "I made you feel like you didn't belong, and that's the last thing I ever wanted." For a moment, I saw her not as my daughter-in-law, but as a tired woman trying to keep 20 plates spinning in the air and dropping the one that happened to have my name on it. I was hurt, I said honestly. I felt erased, like someone had edited me out of a family picture. She nodded quickly, tears spilling over. "I'm so sorry." I picked up the dish towel again, more to have something in my hands than because the plate needed drying. "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is what we do after. You're here, you showed up, and you're talking to me instead of pretending nothing happened." I reached out, touched her arm lightly. "Family isn't about never hurting each other," I added. "It's about choosing to repair instead of walk away." She let out a shaky laugh. "Does that mean I'm forgiven?" "It means," I said, "we're starting again. Better this time." Mark joined us a little later, leaning against the doorway, hands in his pockets the way his father used to stand. "I meant what I said on the phone, Mom," he told me. "I'm sorry. I got comfortable. I assumed you'd always be there waiting for us to fit you in. I didn't think about what it feels like to be the one doing the waiting." I looked at my son. The boy in all the photo albums, now a man with lines around his eyes from squinting at computer screens and worrying about mortgages and college funds. "I can't go back and change how this Christmas started," I said, "but I can decide how the next ones will feel." "And how is that?" he asked. I smiled. With a grandmother who doesn't wait quietly by the phone anymore, I said, with a family who understands that love goes both ways, and maybe, I added, with a guest named David at the table someday. Mark laughed, a real laugh this time. "I'd like to meet the man who talked my mother into flying to Europe by herself," he said. "He didn't talk me into anything," I replied, feeling a little thrill at being able to say it. "I did that part all on my own." The months that followed weren't perfect. Life never suddenly turns into a movie just because you decide to choose yourself once. There were still lonely evenings, days when the house felt too quiet, moments when something small, a smell, a song, a commercial for cold medicine, made me miss Paul so much I had to sit down. But there was something else now, too. A text from David with a photo of some cafe in his town and the message, "Thought you'd like this wallpaper?" A phone call where we made plans to meet in the spring for a shorter trip, just a coastal town, he promised, with good seafood and bad live music. Messages from Mark that didn't always start with "sorry, Mom," or "we've been busy," Sometimes they just said, "Thinking of you," or a picture of the kids yelling, "Hi, Grandma," at the camera. And in my own house, small objects that anchored me in the life I had chosen to build after being told to stay home. The snow globe, the angel, a small framed picture of me and David under that massive Christmas tree, both of us laughing like we just heard the same private joke. The following Christmas, the table in my little Colorado house was full. There were extra chairs squeezed in at the ends. Noise ricocheted off the walls. Someone had spilled cranberry sauce. Hannah's mother came too. She turned out to be warm and funny, with a loud laugh and a habit of telling embarrassing stories about Hannah's childhood. At one point, I caught her eye across the table and we shared a small, knowing smile, two women who had both had to learn how to share a family without losing themselves. When it was time for a toast, Mark stood up, glass in hand. "I want to make one," he said, clearing his throat. "To Mom," he began. I froze, a fork halfway to my mouth. "For showing us," he continued, "that happiness isn't something you sit around waiting for someone to hand you. It's something you go and build with your own two hands, even if that means getting on a plane when everyone else thinks you should just stay home." Everyone chuckled softly. My throat closed up. "To choosing yourself without giving up on us," he added, "to second chances, and to Christmas at Mom's house." Glasses clinked around the table. I looked at all of them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandchildren, Hannah's mother, a messy, imperfect, real family, and felt my heart stretch to hold all of it. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the last car taillights disappeared down the street, I stood by the living room window watching snow tumble lazily from the sky. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the sharp, painful quiet of being left out. It was the soft quiet of a song that had played all the way through and landed on a note that finally felt right. I turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the tree glowing in the corner. Its branches held years of memory now, homemade ornaments from when Mark was small, gifts from Paul, and a small wooden angel with slightly crooked wings from a market stall in Salzburg. On the mantel, the snow globe caught the tree's light, snow swirling gently around the little house inside. I picked up my phone, opened the social media app, and started to type. Last year, my daughter-in-law told me, "Christmas is at my mom's. You can stay home and relax." So I booked a flight instead. I found Christmas in old streets and new faces, in a snow globe from a man who once knew my husband, and in the realization that I don't need an invitation to belong in my own life. If you've ever been told to stay small, to stay quiet, or to stay home, this is your sign. Go find your own adventure. You might just find yourself along the way. I hit post. Then I looked into the camera, switched to video, and recorded the last thing I wanted to say. Not just to my friends, but to anyone who might stumble across my story the way I once stumbled into that tour listing online. "My name is Linda," I said, voice steady, face lit by the glow of the tree. "I'm 67 years old. I'm a widow, a mother, a grandmother. And this year, I stopped waiting for someone to make room for me and chose myself instead." "If you're watching this," I added, "tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever felt like the extra chair at someone else's table. Maybe it's time you set your own." I smiled. "And if you want to hear more stories like mine," I finished, hit subscribe. We still have a lot of life left to live, and I don't plan on staying home.
Sometimes the cruelest words don't sound cruel at all. Christmas is at my mom's. You can stay home and relax. Tonight, we watched what happens when a woman who has given everything to her family finally decides she won't spend another holiday waiting by a silent phone. Instead of begging for a seat at the table, she booked a seat on a plane. She found Christmas in old streets, foreign languages, a snow globe from a stranger who once knew her husband, and in the simple, quiet truth that you don't need an invitation to belong in your own life. If you've ever felt like Linda, like the extra chair that gets pushed against the wall when there are too many people this year, this part is for you. You are not a favor. You are not a burden to fit in if it's convenient. You are a person who has loved, sacrificed, and shown up. You deserve people who show up for you too. So let me ask you, if this were your story, what would you have done when your daughter-in-law said, "You can stay home"? Would you stay quiet and accept it just to keep the peace? Would you confront them and demand your place at the table? Would you do what Linda did, book the flight, and build a Christmas of your own somewhere no one expected you to be? Or would you have walked away for good? Tell me in the comments, A, B, C, or D, and tell me why. And while you're there, drop your location too. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Which city, which country, which little kitchen or bedroom is holding your heart while you listen to other people finally tell the truth? Because that's what this channel is for. Not perfect families, not staged holiday photos, but real people, real mistakes, and real second chances. If Linda's story hit a little too close to home, maybe it's because part of you knows you've been waiting for someone else to choose you, when the person who needs to choose you has been in the mirror this whole time. So here's your gentle reminder. You're allowed to book the flight. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to stop shrinking just to make other people comfortable. You are allowed to choose yourself and still keep your heart open to the people who finally realize what they almost lost. If you have a story like this, about being left out, about coming last, about finally taking your life back, and you're brave enough to share it, you can send it to us anonymously. Your confession might be the one someone else needs to hear to stop waiting and start living. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. If this story made you think, made you cry, or made you feel a little less alone, please remember to subscribe to the channel, tap the bell so you don't miss the next story, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to choose a different kind of Christmas. This is the Confession Stories, and wherever you are, I hope you find the courage to stop waiting for an invitation and write the next chapter of your own life instead. Good night, stay kind, stay brave, and I'll talk to you in the next story.